Welcome back to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're honored to be joined by our next guest. He's the founder of Keesha Warrior Princess. Bob Furniss, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
So let's start. This is a personal storyline for you with your daughter who sadly passed away. Go ahead and let's start with that story so we have some context. So share the story of Keesha.
So I'll start out with sort of how we got here. She was 30 years old and was having some minor issues with breathing and several other things that we later understood was related, but she was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. So we missed a lot of things, or she missed a lot of things, but the real story of her is who she was as a person and who she was as a fighter. So when it became part of her story, one of the things I asked her was, do you want us to tell your story? She was a big social media person. And she said, yes, tell my story. So not only did she live her story out loud on social media, but who she was came out in those stories. And so she went to ECS school. She's a local girl. We've lived in Memphis her whole life. She was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, but we moved here almost immediately. She went to the University of Memphis. She was a proud, what she called was a band geek. She said, that's okay. It paid for my college. So it's okay to be a band geek if it pays for your college.
Well,
so
I love her outlook too, because she's like, win or lose, we're still having fun either way.
That's right. She said that. She did say that. She used to say that. And I can tell you that the band, even when the Tigers lost, they were having a good time. And what was really cool about it is she actually went to school there during the time of D'Angelo Williams. So they actually won and went to bowl games. So she had a great 5 years, I think, as a marching Tiger. And she was proud of that. She was a daycare teacher. So she used to say she had 27 kids, all of them not the same every day. So she was that kind of person. When not too long after she died, a friend of hers came over and said she was the purest soul I've ever known because she found good in everyone. In fact, one more little comment I wasn't going to talk about was we created these Keesha Warrior Princess bracelets and gave them to friends to remind them to pray for her when she was in the middle of it. And it said, live like Keesha on it. And I've got friends that still wear them so that they can tell her story about who she was as a person and what her impact was on, one of the stories I can remember. She went through 14 different chemo regimens, not 14 times, 14 different regimens over the 4-year period. And I can remember one time she was leaning over, maybe not for the radio audience, but she was leaning over and she had just been doing what you do when you have chemo for a good 5 to 8 minutes. She had been sick and she sat back up and she went, well, that was better on the outside than it was on the inside. And she used to talk about that if she was really sick, that must mean that the cancer's being worked on and coming out. And so while the ending is horrible, who she was as a person is part of our story, because towards the end, she said, you tell anybody my story because I don't want them to do what I did. So that's the personal catalyst of where we start. And the reason why we hope that this is wildly successful.
Talk about setting up this nonprofit and what your mission and purpose is.
So the catalyst was talking to her, but then there was a moment where I wrote an article in the Commercial Appeal. I wrote a story to the editor during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I thought maybe they might publish it. it was what the question every dad should ask his daughter. And I came up with the hashtag Ask Her, which I'm not the first person I'm sure that's ever used the Ask Her hashtag. But the story talked about who she was, but it talked about it through my eyes of, I used to ask my daughter, do you have enough gas in the car are you sure you got gas? I used to say, are you being careful when you walk through the parking lots? Are you sure you know who's at the door before you open the door? But I never said, are you going to the gynecologist? Because that's not what dads do. But I can tell you this dad tells that story everywhere he can, because if you've got daughters who are 25 to 45, 11% of all new breast cancer diagnosed in America is ages 25 to 45. And we have specific stories. There's a young girl who lives named Alex, who lives in Australia, who read that article. She knew Keisha, but just didn't think about it. But it's something about it clicked in her head. And she had been in Australia for 2 years, had not been going to the doctor, and made an appointment, found a lump, found out it was breast cancer, flew back to the US to have surgery at the same place Keisha went, which was West Cancer Center. And she credits that story, Keisha's story, with potentially saving her life. What we know is, it's interesting to me that what we're after is, we don't want anybody to have cancer, no one to have breast cancer. But what we really know is that finding it in stage 0 or stage 1 or even stage 2 increases your chances of survival just astronomically, right? And so if 11% are found, I was talking to a research doctor, and he said he believes with us that this is a little demographic that's not talked about a lot, because most of the time you don't start mammograms until you're 40, and I think even that's moved to 45. So you just don't look for the right signs. And we believe that it's two categories. It's doing the monthly self-exam for a woman to know her body. It's not as much about finding something, but knowing something that changed from the previous month, right? And then having that annual checkup. So with the gynecologist, with an OBGYN, because they look at a female's body differently. Keisha was going to a regular doctor. In fact, she was going, and they said, oh, you must have asthma. You've had asthma, you must be having some asthma problems. Or your back you have a hurt in your back, you must have pulled a muscle. But what they didn't do was ask the question, are you going to your OBGYN, which sadly she was not. So what we want to do is get the message out to women and to men who love women. Make sure that this is happening. It's not a hard thing to do. It's literally about reminding yourself that the importance of those two things.
Yeah.
And that's part of our mission is to put that out there, that story out there, but then to come alongside the women with additional resources to make sure that happens.
Well, and like you're talking, one, to empower fathers, I think that's where the approach you're taking is a little different, with you saying, hey, as a father, I didn't ask this question and I wish I would have. For other fathers, ask this question.
Ask this question.
And then to your point, for women 25 to 40 who think, oh, I'm not at risk. This is something that is a little bit later. You're saying no. One, look at the numbers, 11%. That's actually a big number, and every single life is important. But know your body, get those tests, get those checkups with your gynecologist, and make sure you are taking care of your body and looking for the early detection and the signs so that this doesn't happen to you. And I think that's on both layers, as a parent, and then for the individuals, for the younger women, to really appreciate and understand this is important. That's a huge piece of this.
Well, and I'll open it up to your brothers and your like it's something that a whole family should just not be afraid to talk about, is this happening? Because I'll share another story. I was in Boston on business not too long after Keisha died, and it was still pretty fresh. And I had an extra hour or so, and I was at a meeting over by where Boston Cheers bar is. I don't know if you've ever been to it. It looks totally different than the one on TV, but I went to it. I was sitting at the bar having a beer, and a man and his wife sat down beside me, struck up a conversation, and she said something that no one had yet asked me, which was, how many children do you have? And I said, I have 2. And she said, oh, a boy and a girl? And I said, yes. And then she said, well, how old are they? And so now you're playing this in your brain. Do I tell this whole story? Can I tell this whole story? So I shared the story, and the husband leaned over to his wife and named 2 daughters. So they had 2 daughters, one 25, one 27. And he said, I can't remember their names. I wish I could. He said, do Sarah and Rebecca, did whoever they were, do they go to the doctor? And his wife said, I don't know, but I bet I know by the time we get home. So what you realize is that it truly is just a conversation that creates that kind of opportunity. So that's the conversation we want to have through various channels, and we can talk about those.
One question before we talk about those: how has this changed you and your wife, your family relationship, and how you view others? So in other words, how has this changed you all, but then also too, how you view the world? How has that changed for you?
Well, so the death of a child is hard to put into words. There literally is no, like, if my wife dies, I'm a widower. There is no word for losing your child. There isn't an adjective other than empty. And so it's changed us there. During her 4 years of battle, the focus was on her. The focus was on whatever it takes. Like, we didn't look back and say, how did we get here? There's no reason to waste energy on that. And by the way, if you're a woman watching this and you get diagnosed at stage 3, it's where you are. Now, what do we do about it? How do we make it better? There's no shame or no negative of getting where you are and starting from there. And that's what she did. And people have told us she lived a better life in 4 years than I've lived in my entire life. So we know how much she lived out loud. Over my shoulder is a pair of pink cleats. We went to a sideline game at the Pittsburgh Steelers. She was a Steeler fan, black and gold blood running through her body. And D'Angelo Williams, a friend of mine set it up. D'Angelo Williams was playing at the Steelers. He came over, I could show you the picture. He came over, took off his pink cleats as he was walking out after pregame and handed them to her. She lived life completely. But how it's changed us is to remind ourselves of that. In other words, the reality of one more hour at the office may or may not be the right hour for you to spend. So it's changed that. But this nonprofit has really given us a focus to tell a story that we don't really want to tell, right? Because there's some pain in knowing that we didn't ask the questions. So it's changed us. It's also made us, sometimes it draws you apart. I think it's made us closer as a family. Her support group was wide and involved, and so those people have in reality lifted us up. And for instance, her best friend from middle school on is the treasurer in our nonprofit. She's a local CPA. She's a local CFO at a bank here in Memphis, and she's now the treasurer. The secretary is married into a family that we've known for 15, 20 years. She came from the nonprofit environment. So her story has transformed who we are. I have a son who's 35-ish. I probably said that wrong. Who has two grandkids. I can tell you that every moment is a special moment because you realize how short life can be. And so you put those things in perspective. So while those are the personal sides, what we want to do is we're okay that we'll go through some pain and we'll go through some tough moments reliving things that are negative in order for other people not to live those. That's my goal.
Talk about how we can help. So obviously you have a website, you have resources, but talk about how we can help, financial contributions. What do we do to help?
So you found us early, Jeremy. You connected through someone and found me early. So how you can help is help us become bigger than we are today. I think we have 300 followers on Facebook. So if you go to Warrior Princess, Keesha Warrior Princess at Facebook, there's a page, like us, find out about our story. We'll keep you updated about the success. There's a community on there. We want to celebrate the way that she celebrated life. There's a community, a closed group community there for women or men to talk about their survivorship, to talk about their problems, their issues. Join that, be involved in that. If that's who you are, we'll help you there. Join our website, go to the Join Me, and then donate to us. We have been launched now for about 4 weeks and have been working on it much longer than that, but officially plan to launch via a large party. But with COVID happening, we launched the same way I'm talking to you now, through a Zoom call, right? And so donate, help us through donations to Keesha Warrior Princess. And we'll use that money wisely. We've raised just almost $19,000 in a very short period of time. And we'll use that money wisely to communicate to women in this fashion. So right now it's through social media. How can you help us? We would love to build an app, reminder app, that has the capability for a woman to just easily put in her information. She goes to the doctor, and a year from now or once a month, it reminds her, hey, it's Thursday. You're supposed to be doing a breast exam today. And then once a year reminds her that it's time to make an appointment or to confirm your appointment. So, and we've got a whole series of other things we think that app could actually provide to the community at large. But if you've got that kind of experience and something that you can help with, if marketing is who you are, we would love to talk to you. Just the natural things that you can imagine when you're brand new into the marketplace as a nonprofit. Here are the opportunities. You come tell me what you can do for me, and I'll bet you I can find a place to let you help us.
Absolutely. Well, and like you said, every parent, everyone needs to know how to ask the questions, how to normalize these conversations, how to encourage their daughters, their sisters, their loved ones to be able to get their regular checkups, to know themselves better. And so the awareness to me is so important, and spreading that, and then obviously raising awareness for the organization as well as a vital resource is so important. And then the fundraising and the app and all those that go along with that as opportunities. But for everyone, Keesha is spelled Keesha. So Keesha Warrior Princess, and make sure and get involved. So Bob,
and if you've got an opportunity, I'm sorry, one more. If you've got an opportunity for us to speak at a small gathering or an organizational meeting, I realize that COVID keeps us in this world. I'm okay to be Zoomed. And then if at some point in the future, when we start getting back out into the world, definitely want to get back out into the world and talk to people about this.
Well, like I said, thank you for all you and your family, for all you do. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.